The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the familiar streets of Hendersonville, North Carolina. It was September 18th, a Tuesday, and for 38-year-old Emily Carter, it began like any other day. The mother of two, a woman known for her vibrant spirit and unwavering dedication to her children, decided to make a quick run to the local Walmart. It was a routine errand, one she had likely completed countless times before. She told her husband, Mark, she'd be back soon. Her small, sensible SUV, a dark blue Ford Escape, pulled out of their driveway. The distance to the Walmart was mere miles, a journey that should have taken less than 20 minutes. But Emily Carter never returned that day. The last confirmed trace of her presence was a cell phone ping, a digital whisper from the heart of the retail giant's parking lot. Investigators would later meticulously reconstruct the known movements. Emily had arrived at Walmart, purchased a few items, and then nothing. The simple trip, meant to be a brief interruption in her day, had morphed into an impenetrable mystery. Her family, initially concerned by her slightly extended absence, soon escalated to a desperate urgency. The hours stretched into a nightmarish eternity without any word. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the image of Emily Carter, a beloved mother and wife, began to fade from public view, replaced by the cold, hard reality of her disappearance. The initial pang of worry morphed into a gnawing dread. Where could she have gone? Had something happened to her in that sprawling parking lot, overlooked by countless shoppers and security cameras? The local police department, now a hive of activity, sifted through every lead, no matter how small. They canvassed the area, interviewed neighbors, and appealed to the public for any potential sightings. But the trail, so promising at first with that final cell phone ping, had gone completely cold. It was as if Emily Carter had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the echoes of a life abruptly interrupted. The investigation, already a grueling ordeal, was about to take a turn so bizarre, so unexpected, that it would shake the foundations of their grief and uncertainty. 8 months after Emily's vanishing act, a discovery was made in a place no one had thought to look, a place miles away from her last known location. Divers, responding to a fisherman's unusual find, pulled a vehicle from the murky depths of Lake Lonesome. It was Emily's Ford Escape. But the chilling revelation wasn't just the discovery itself. Inside that submerged vehicle, a crucial detail would soon emerge, a detail that defied all initial assumptions and pointed towards a far more disturbing truth. Something inside that car didn't belong to Emily Carter. The surveillance footage from Walmart offered a flicker of hope, a tangible link to Emily Carter's last known moments. Investigators meticulously reviewed hours of grainy, black-and-white imagery, desperately seeking a clue, a sign, anything that could explain her disappearance. The footage clearly showed Emily's familiar dark blue Ford Escape entering the Walmart parking lot on that fateful Tuesday afternoon. Her image, captured perhaps for the last time, moved decisively through the aisles. She was seen browsing, selecting items, behaving just as any shopper would. There was no hint of distress, no sign of a struggle, nothing to suggest she wasn't just on a routine shopping trip. She even seemed to navigate the checkout process normally. The cameras had provided a snapshot of her presence, a confirmation that she had indeed been there. But when the investigators scrubbed through the footage for her departure, a gaping void appeared. There was no footage of Emily Carter or her Ford Escape leaving the Walmart premises. It was as if she had simply phased through the walls, or the cameras had conveniently blinked out of existence at the precise moment she should have been exiting. This glaring omission immediately raised a cascade of questions, each more unsettling than the last. Were the Walmart security cameras malfunctioning that day? Were there blind spots in their coverage? Or, more ominously, had the footage been deliberately erased or never recorded at all for a specific period? The possibility of tampering flickered through the minds of the detectives. Adding another layer of profound strangeness was the discovery of Emily's purse. It was found inside the shopping cart, still at the store, completely untouched. Her wallet, credit cards, and identification were all present. This detail was deeply perplexing. If she had been the victim of an abduction or foul play, why would an assailant leave her purse, her source of identity and funds, behind? It suggested a scenario far removed from a simple opportunistic crime. The scene at the Walmart contradicted so many common narratives of missing persons cases. The lack of a visible exit from the store's surveillance system, coupled with the untouched purse, painted a picture that was anything but clear. It was a puzzle with missing pieces, pieces that seemed intentionally removed. The investigators, frustrated by the dead ends and the unsettling ambiguities, circled back to the Walmart management. They demanded access to all available footage, all maintenance logs, anything that could shed light on the apparent camera failures or omissions. Was it possible that the technology itself had betrayed them, or had it been manipulated to conceal a truth that lay hidden within those frames? The enigma of Emily's departure from Walmart deepened, leaving investigators to ponder whether she had been erased from the recorded world, or whether the world itself had been erased for her. As the days bled into weeks and the media's attention began to shift, Emily Carter's family, consumed by a desperate need to find her, turned to the television cameras for help. Her husband, Mark, a man by most accounts stoic and reserved, presented himself on local news broadcasts, his voice measured as he pleaded for anyone with information to come forward. He spoke of his love for Emily, his worry for their children, and his fervent hope for her safe return. His interviews, however, conveyed a disquieting calm. In the face of such profound personal tragedy, his composed demeanor struck some viewers, including seasoned investigators, as odd. While grief manifests in countless ways, Mark's steady presence and lack of overt emotional turmoil, as displayed on a public platform, began to plant seeds of quiet suspicion. It was a subtlety, a nuance in his presentation, that felt out of sync with the raw desperation typically seen in such dire circumstances. Meanwhile, investigators were piecing together Emily's recent life through interviews with her friends and colleagues. One coworker, speaking anonymously, recalled a subtle but noticeable shift in Emily's behavior in the week leading up to her disappearance. She had seemed distant, preoccupied, and uncharacteristically quiet. This coworker couldn't pinpoint a specific cause, but remembered Emily appearing lost in her own thoughts more than usual. The local police, building a comprehensive profile of Emily and her life, soon inquired about Mark's activities and involvement in the search efforts. It became apparent that while he had cooperated with initial requests, he had not actively participated in the ground searches of the surrounding areas, the canvassing of neighborhoods, or the creation of widely distributed missing person flyers. When questioned about his absence from these crucial community-driven efforts, Mark's response was chillingly vague. I had things I needed to tend to," he reportedly stated, his gaze not quite meeting the interviewers. He offered no further elaboration, no concrete explanation for why he was not out there, shoulder to shoulder with friends and strangers, searching for his wife. It was an answer that left more questions than it resolved, a cryptic deflection that felt inadequate in the face of his wife's vanishing. The disconnect between his public persona of a grieving husband and his quiet, almost detached, participation in the search for Emily began to create a subtle but persistent undercurrent of doubt. The smooth facade he presented on television was starting to crack under the scrutiny of detail, hinting at complexities that lay beneath the surface. Why wasn't he more visibly distraught? Why wasn't he leading the charge to find his missing wife? These questions, silently forming in the minds of many, would fuel further inquiry into what had truly happened to Emily Carter. As the official investigation into Emily Carter's disappearance continued, often hitting frustrating dead ends, her inner circle began to grapple with the enormity of the situation in their own ways. One person who felt the weight of Emily's absence profoundly was her sister, Sarah. Driven by a deep love for her sibling and a growing unease, Sarah found herself replaying every conversation, every shared moment, searching for any overlooked detail that might hold a key. It was during one of these introspective dives into her memories that Sarah recalled something peculiar, something that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now, in the chilling context of Emily's vanishing, felt like a chilling premonition. About 3 weeks before Emily disappeared, during a casual conversation, Emily had suddenly asked Sarah a rather unusual question. "Hey," Emily had said, her tone light, almost flippant, "how do you think you could track someone's car without them knowing?" She followed it up with a brief laugh, as if dismissing the thought as a whimsical curiosity. Sarah, caught off guard by the oddness of the question, had simply shrugged it off. She couldn't recall her exact response, but she remembered thinking it was a strange thing for Emily to ask. At the time, Sarah had attributed Emily's question to a passing thought, perhaps a hypothetical scenario from a movie or a book. Emily had always been imaginative, and Sarah hadn't given it a second thought. But now, with Emily gone, with the entire family living under a cloud of terrifying uncertainty, that seemingly innocent question took on an entirely new and sinister dimension. Sarah remembered Emily looking thoughtful when she asked it, not joking or playful. It was a question born out of a curiosity that now, in retrospect, felt deeply rooted in anxiety or even fear. Why would Emily be concerned about tracking someone's car secretly just weeks before she disappeared? Was she worried about someone else? Or was she contemplating an action herself? The implications were unsettling. If Emily had been contemplating tracking someone, what were her intentions? And if she had been worried about being tracked, who or what was she afraid of? The question, once a fleeting moment of domestic oddity, now loomed large in Sarah's mind, casting a dark shadow over Emily's last days. Sarah found herself not so sure that Emily had been joking at all. The memory, once dismissed, now gnawed at her, suggesting that Emily may have harbored a secret concern, a fear that had gone unvoiced and undiscovered until it was tragically too late. The official investigation, while ongoing, was slow and meticulous. For Emily Carter's loved ones, however, time was a luxury they did not possess. The agony of uncertainty fueled a need for action, for anything that could bring them closer to finding Emily or understanding what had happened. It was this burning desire that prompted a close family friend, a woman named Brenda, to take matters into her own hands. Brenda, deeply affected by Emily's absence and frustrated by the pace of the police investigation, began to organize her own separate search efforts. She rallied a group of concerned individuals willing to retrace Emily's steps, distribute flyers, and explore any potential leads that the police might have overlooked or deemed low priority. Her goal was simple and heartfelt: to keep Emily's case in the public eye and to generate new avenues of information. Brenda started coordinating volunteer teams, planning routes, and setting up a dedicated online presence to coordinate their activities. She believed that a more grassroots, personal touch could make a difference. She was driven by the same desperation that Emily's family felt, channeling her grief and frustration into proactive measures. However, Brenda's well-intentioned initiatives were met with an abrupt and unexpected obstacle. A letter arrived at her home, a formal legal document that sent a chill down her spine. It was a cease and desist letter, instructing her to immediately halt all her search activities and to cease any further public statements or media inquiries related to Emily Carter's disappearance. The letter was purportedly from Emily's husband, Mark. It cited privacy concerns and the potential for interference with the ongoing official investigation as reasons for its demand. Brenda was stunned. She had always believed Mark was as desperate as everyone else to find Emily. But when Brenda and Emily's family inquired with the police department, they received an unsettling response. While they acknowledged receiving a similar letter, the detectives could not definitively confirm that the cease and desist order had indeed originated from Mark Carter himself. There were doubts about its authenticity, about the provenance of the signature, and about the true intentions behind its delivery. This ambiguity was profoundly disturbing. If the letter wasn't authentically from Mark, then who was behind it? who had such a vested interest in silencing Brenda's efforts, in quelling the grassroots search for Emily. The implication was clear. Someone, somewhere, did not want Emily to be found, or at least, did not want any additional efforts being made to find her. The attempt to shut down Brenda's search added a new, sinister layer to the mystery, suggesting a calculated effort to control the narrative and suppress any potential discoveries. The absence of Emily Carter left a gaping void in the lives of her two young children. The sudden loss of their mother, a figure of comfort and stability, was a trauma that would profoundly shape their formative years. Left in the care of their aunt, Emily's sister, Sarah, the children struggled to process the unimaginable. The questions about their mother's whereabouts hung heavy in the air, unanswered and unanswerable for a time. Sarah, now the sole guardian of her niece and nephew, did her best to create a sense of normalcy, to shield them from the harsh realities of the adult world and the unfolding investigation. Yet the weight of their mother's disappearance was a constant, palpable presence in their lives. Children, with their unfiltered perceptions, often communicate their understanding of the world in ways that adults might overlook or misinterpret. One afternoon, as Sarah was helping her nephew and niece cope with their grief, the younger child, perhaps confused and seeking answers, sat down to draw. Armed with crayons and a fresh sheet of paper, the child began to sketch, translating their jumbled thoughts and feelings into a visual narrative. What emerged from the child's innocent hand was a drawing that would momentarily freeze Sarah's blood. The drawing depicted a car, submerged underwater, with a figure inside. It was a simple, childlike rendering, but the imagery was stark and terrifying. Sarah, deeply unsettled by the drawing's morbid subject matter, particularly given the circumstances, knew she had to show it to the police. It might be nothing more than a child's imaginative expression of their fears, but in this case, every potential lead, no matter how unconventional, had to be explored. When the police reviewed the drawing, their professional composure wavered for just an instant. They confirmed to Sarah that the image, while disturbing, matched nothing that had been publicly released or that had been discovered in their investigation thus far. There had been no speculation about Emily's car being underwater, no visual evidence of it. This detail was astonishing. How could a child, unaware of any specific details of the investigation that had not been shared, draw such a specific and accurate depiction of a car submerged in water? It suggested an unconscious awareness, a deep-seated intuition, or perhaps even a subconscious memory that the child had somehow internalized. The image raised a chilling question that echoed in the quiet interrogation rooms and in the hearts of the investigators. How would a child know what hadn't been discovered yet? It pointed towards a horrifying possibility that a young mind might hold a secret that the adult world was desperate to uncover. 8 months. 8 months of agonizing silence, of hope dwindling with each passing day, of a family trapped in a perpetual state of limbo. The initial intensive search efforts had long since subsided, leaving only the indelible scar of Emily Carter's disappearance. The case had grown cold, a file gathering dust in an evidence locker, the vibrant life it represented fading into a tragic memory. But the vast, indifferent expanse of Lake Lonesome held a secret that was about to be unwillingly revealed. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind that hints at the coming winter. A local fisherman, a man familiar with the rhythms and depths of Lake Lonesome, cast his line into the unusually calm waters. As he waited for a bite, his experienced eye caught a glint of something unnatural beneath the surface, something metallic and out of place. It wasn't the usual debris or submerged tree branches that sometimes caught the light. This was a distinct unnatural shape, reflecting the sun with a dulled sheen. Intrigued and a little concerned, the fisherman alerted the local authorities. His report, initially treated with the cautious skepticism that often accompanies such unsolicited tips, soon gained traction. The fisherman insisted he had seen something significant, something that didn't belong. When dive teams were dispatched to the area, their sonar equipment began to paint a clearer picture of the anomaly on the lake bed. The object was large, rectangular, and undeniably a vehicle. As the divers descended into the frigid, murky water, their lights illuminated a sight that sent a wave of shock through the observers on shore. Partially buried in the silt and debris of the lakebed sat a dark blue Ford Escape. It was Emily Carter's SUV. The recovery operation was painstaking, each movement deliberate and charged with an almost unbearable tension. As the vehicle was slowly hoisted from its watery grave, the reality of its location began to sink in for the authorities. It had been submerged for months, a silent testament to the time that had passed since Emily's life had taken its tragic turn. The car was eventually brought back to solid ground, its exterior coated in a thick layer of algae and mud. Investigators carefully approached the vehicle, their senses heightened, their minds racing with possibilities. The driver's side door was locked. The keys were still in the ignition, a detail that immediately struck them as perplexing. In a panic, one might drop the keys, but leaving them in the ignition after somehow ending up in a lake. It seemed unlikely. Perhaps the most disquieting observation, however, was the complete absence of any evidence of a struggle or a crash at the water's edge. There were no skid marks leading up to the bank, no tire impressions suggesting a desperate attempt to brake or swerve. The car had entered the lake not as if it had lost control, but almost as if it had been placed there. The scene offered no immediate explanation for its presence, and the keys in the ignition felt like a deliberate, unsettling clue. The muddy, waterlogged Ford Escape was a grim relic, a vessel that had held Emily Carter captive for 8 long months. As investigators carefully worked to preserve any potential evidence, the state of the vehicle provided a chilling narrative of its time submerged in Lake Lonesome. The windows were all rolled up, sealed shut against the encroaching water. The doors, too, were locked from the inside, further suggesting that whatever had happened, it hadn't been a simple accidental plunge. This sealed condition of the vehicle presented investigators with a perplexing paradox. Normally, a car submerged for an extended period, especially one with electrical systems, would show significant signs of water damage to its internal components. Corrosion, short circuits, and the general disintegration of sensitive electronics would be expected. However, remarkably, there was no substantial water damage to the vehicle's electrical system that would indicate it had been submerged for such a duration, or indeed, that it had been driven into the water and left there. This lack of expected water damage led to a startling hypothesis, one that shifted the entire focus of the investigation. Investigators began to entertain the possibility that the vehicle had not been driven into the lake by Emily, or anyone succumbing to a momentary lapse in judgment. Instead, the evidence began to suggest something far more deliberate, that the car had been placed into the lake, likely using some external means, rather than being actively driven into it. This idea of mechanical placement, rather than accidental or intentional driving, was a significant departure from their initial assumptions. The implications of this theory were profound. If the car had been placed there, it meant that Emily Carter had not been in the vehicle when it entered the water, or at least not in control of it. It suggested a meticulous planning, a calculated act to conceal her fate and her vehicle. And then there was the discovery on the passenger seat. Amidst the mud and debris, a single item stood out. It was a men's work glove. Its size was notably large, far too large to have belonged to Emily Carter, a woman with petite hands. This object, alien to Emily's personal effects, was a stark and undeniable piece of evidence. It was a tangible link to someone else, someone who had been in or near the vehicle recently enough for the glove to have remained relatively preserved in the submerged environment. The glove, a symbol of manual labor, now represented a deep mystery, a silent witness to an unknown presence in Emily's final moments. The dam of silence that had surrounded Emily Carter's life began to break, not with a torrent, but with a trickle. A coworker who had maintained a respectful distance for months finally reached out to the investigators. This individual, clearly hesitant and anxious, agreed to an interview. sensing the growing urgency of the case and perhaps feeling a moral imperative to share what they knew. Their decision to speak marked a significant, albeit delayed, breakthrough. The coworker revealed a series of unsettling interactions with Emily in the months leading up to her disappearance. 3 months prior to the day she vanished, Emily had approached them with a specific and frankly peculiar question. She had inquired about the workings of burner phones. She wanted to know how they functioned, how they could be acquired, and crucially, how they could be used to remain anonymous. Her fascination with burner phones was not a casual curiosity, the coworker explained. Emily had appeared genuinely concerned, hinting that she believed someone was tracking her. She spoke of a pervasive feeling of being watched, of a sense of unease that had started to permeate her daily life. She had been looking for a way to disconnect, to disappear from an unseen observer's gaze. This revelation painted a dramatically different picture of Emily Carter's state of mind. Instead of a woman simply going about her daily routines, she was someone who felt threatened, someone actively seeking to protect herself from an unknown stalker. Her perceived distance in the weeks before her disappearance now seemed less like general preoccupation and more like heightened anxiety and fear. Furthermore, during these hushed conversations, Emily had mentioned a name. It was a name that, at the time, the coworker hadn't fully understood the significance of, but now, in light of the ongoing investigation, it felt like a crucial piece of the puzzle. She had confided in the coworker, speaking of this individual with a mixture of apprehension and perhaps even a touch of familiarity. The name she mentioned was someone close to the family, someone whose presence in Emily's life had been largely unnoticed by many. The coworker later learned, through discreet inquiries, that this individual had a history, a past that was not widely known or discussed within the family circle. A history that, when juxtaposed with Emily's growing fears and her inquiries into burner phones, suddenly seemed very relevant. This hidden history, combined with Emily's palpable fear, pointed towards a danger lurking much closer than anyone had initially imagined. The growing body of suspicious details surrounding Emily Carter's disappearance inevitably led investigators back to her husband, Mark. The lingering questions about his calm demeanor, his vague answers, and his lack of participation in the search efforts, coupled with the new information about Emily's fear and the discovery of the oversized work glove, made a second interview a necessity. This time the questions were more pointed, the atmosphere more charged. Mark was brought back to the police station. He sat across from the detectives, his posture still measured, his eyes steady. They presented him with the evidence they had found in Emily's recovered SUV, the large men's work glove. His reaction was immediate, albeit guarded. He firmly stated that he had never owned gloves like that they were not his, and that he had no idea whose they could be. He reaffirmed his lack of knowledge regarding Emily's fears or any potential threats she might have faced. His denial, however, did not satisfy the investigators. They had a growing sense that he was not being entirely forthcoming, and their suspicions were further fueled by a tangential detail related to his workshop. Mark maintained a separate workspace, a detached workshop behind their home, where he pursued various hobbies and projects. A previous search of this workshop had yielded nothing directly incriminating at the time. But armed with the glove and Mark's denial, the investigators decided to take a more thorough look. They obtained a second search warrant for his workshop, this time with a more focused objective. They meticulously combed through every corner, every toolbox, every storage unit. Their persistence paid off. Tucked away inside a nondescript cardboard box, hidden amongst various items labeled camping supplies, they found it. Nestled amongst tents, sleeping bags, and other outdoor gear was a pair of men's work gloves, and they were a perfect match. Identical in size, color, and material to the one discovered in the submerged Ford Escape. The discovery in the workshop stood in stark contrast to Mark's earlier claims. It provided a direct link to his belongings, linking him to the glove found in his wife's car. The camouflage of a camping supply box seemed like a deliberate attempt to obscure this evidence. The gap between his denial and the undeniable physical evidence was widening, and the investigation was tightening its grip. The revelation of the matching work gloves in Mark Carter's workshop sent shockwaves through the small community of Hendersonville. The narrative of a grieving husband began to fray, replaced by a complex and deeply divisive picture. As the police presented their findings, the public's perception fractured. Mark's brother, a man who had largely remained silent throughout the ordeal, stepped forward in his defense. He offered a compelling counterargument, suggesting that the gloves could have been planted. He posited that someone, perhaps an enemy of Mark's or someone trying to frame him, could have placed the matching gloves in his workshop to implicating him in Emily's disappearance and death. This alternative theory, while speculative, tapped into a deep-seated distrust of authority and the possibility of manipulation that often surfaces in controversial cases. The community found itself deeply polarized. Neighbors who had once shared potlucks and friendly greetings were now on opposing sides of an invisible line. Some fervently believed in Mark's guilt, seeing the evidence as irrefutable. Others rallied behind him, convinced of his innocence and the possibility of a setup. A protest formed outside the local police department. Signs waved and voices chanted, some demanding justice for Emily, others demanding freedom for their wrongly accused neighbor. The tension in the air was thick, a palpable reflection of the town's internal conflict. It was a town divided, grief and suspicion battling for dominance. Amidst this public turmoil, the case was quietly submitted to the district attorney's office. The evidence, carefully gathered and meticulously documented, was laid out for legal review. The prosecutor held the weighty responsibility of determining whether there was enough probable cause to pursue charges against Mark Carter. Yet, despite the incriminating evidence of the matching gloves, the circumstantial nature of Emily's last moments on surveillance, and the questions surrounding Mark's behavior, no charges were filed. The DA's office, citing insufficient evidence for a conviction or even to establish probable cause beyond a reasonable doubt, decided against pursuing a criminal case at that time. The lack of a clear motive, a definitive timeline of Emily's death, and the possibility of alternative explanations for the evidence, even if unlikely, created a legal hurdle that could not be overcome. The community was left in a state of suspended judgment, the case unresolved, and Emily Carter's true fate still shrouded in mystery. Why were the charges not filed? What crucial piece of the puzzle was still missing? As the legal system grappled with the complexities of Emily Carter's case, the most vulnerable individuals caught in its vortex were her two young children. The aunt, Sarah, who had taken them in after Emily's disappearance, became their steadfast anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The children, grappling with the absence of their mother and the public spectacle surrounding their father, needed stability and a sense of permanence. Sarah, deeply concerned for the well-being of her niece and nephew, decided to take a decisive step. She filed for permanent custody of the children. It was a legal maneuver that signaled a profound shift in the family dynamic and implied a stark judgment on the situation unfolding around them. Her petition to the court was not merely about legal guardianship. It was a plea for protection. During the custody hearing, Sarah presented a compelling case to the judge. She spoke not only of the children's emotional needs and their current stable environment with her, but also of specific statements made by the children themselves. These were not general expressions of sadness or longing for their mother. Sarah testified that the children had shared certain details, certain observations about their mother's disappearance and about their father's involvement that had not been made public. These candid, perhaps fragmented, accounts from the children, delivered in the innocence of youth but carrying the weight of profound understanding, were a critical factor in the judge's decision. The judge listened intently, recognizing the gravity of these young voices amidst the adult drama. The information, even if not fully understood by the children in a legal sense, suggested a narrative that lent credence to the suspicions surrounding Mark Carter. Ultimately, the court ruled in Sarah's favor. The judge ordered that custody of the children be permanently transferred from their father to their aunt. This decision effectively removed Emily and Mark's children from their father's direct care, a significant legal blow and a powerful indicator of the court's assessment of Mark's suitability as a guardian. Following this ruling, Mark Carter seemed to retreat entirely from public life. He disappeared from the local news, from community events, and from any public or legal appearances. His silence mirrored the silence that had enveloped Emily's case. The father, once a visible figure in his wife's vanishing, became an absence, a ghost in his own story, leaving the fate of Emily unresolved and his own complicity perpetually under scrutiny. The children, now more secure, carried the unspoken truths of their experiences, their childhood forever marked by the mysteries surrounding their mother's end. The unresolved nature of Emily Carter's disappearance, the lack of charges, and the general air of suspicion surrounding her husband continued to fuel lingering questions within the community and among a select few dedicated to uncovering the truth. One such individual was a tenacious local reporter, a journalist who had been following the story since Emily first went missing. Unwilling to let the case fade into obscurity, she decided to pursue a more unconventional avenue of investigation. Her new strategy focused on data, on seemingly innocuous records that might hold a hidden narrative. She filed a Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) request targeting highway toll data. Her objective was to obtain records of vehicles passing through toll booths in the vicinity of Lake Lonesome, the body of water where Emily's SUV had been discovered. She believed that by cross-referencing this electronic data with known timelines, she might find a crucial link. The reporter meticulously analyzed the toll data, comparing timestamps with dates and locations relevant to the investigation. Her focus was particularly sharp on the period immediately following Emily's disappearance. She was looking for any discrepancies, any unaccounted-for movements by individuals of interest. Her persistence paid off. A particular toll camera, situated on a highway leading towards Lake Lonesome, logged a specific vehicle's license plate. The timestamp associated with this registration was significant. It placed the vehicle near the lake approximately 1 hour after Mark Carter had stated he was at work, attending to his business responsibilities, on the day Emily disappeared. This piece of information was a critical crack in Mark's alibi. It indicated that he was not where he claimed to be during a crucial period. The reporter reached out to the police with her findings. The authorities, aware of Mark's previous statements about his whereabouts that day, were forced to acknowledge this new piece of evidence. When confronted with this toll data, Mark Carter had no further explanation. He had never provided any justifiable reason for this unaccounted-for hour. The missing 60 minutes, the hour spent traveling towards the very lake where his wife's car would eventually be found, remained a stark, unexplained anomaly in his account. The reporter's digging had unearthed a critical gap, a void in his narrative that only deepened the suspicions surrounding his involvement and the events of that fateful day. The submerged Ford Escape, once recovered from the murky depths of Lake Lonesome, yielded more than just the car itself and the mysterious work glove. Investigators, meticulously processing the vehicle for any trace evidence, made another significant discovery that added a chilling layer to the already complex puzzle. Hidden beneath the passenger seat, concealed from casual view and the initial sweeps, they found a second mobile phone. This was not Emily Carter's personal phone. It was a separate, secondary device, one that she had not been known to possess or use. The revelation of this hidden phone immediately raised a host of alarming questions. Why would Emily have a second, clandestine phone? Who was she communicating with through it? And why was it so carefully hidden? The phone itself presented an immediate challenge to the investigators. Its contents were encrypted, a digital fortress designed to protect its secrets. Deciphering the stored messages, call logs, and any other data required advanced forensic techniques and considerable time. The process was painstaking, each layer of security a testament to the phone's intended anonymity. While the full contents remained locked away, the forensic team managed to recover a partially deleted image. It was a fragmented photograph, its pixels distorted, but the subject matter chillingly clear. The photograph showed Emily Carter inside the Ford Escape, the familiar interior of her vehicle visible in the background. But she was not alone in the image. Crucially, a second individual was visible in the photograph, clearly occupying the driver's seat. This person's hands were on the steering wheel, their profile partially obscured but undeniably present. The implication was profound. Emily was not alone in her car, and the person driving was not her. This photograph, a ghost from a lost moment, provided visual evidence of another presence, another individual involved in Emily's final known journey, or at least, in the moments leading up to her disappearance in that vehicle. The partially recovered photograph from the hidden burner phone was a critical piece of evidence, but its true significance was unlocked when facial recognition technology was employed. The investigators, armed with definitive images of individuals closely connected to Emily Carter, fed the photo into the system, hoping for a match. The results were definitive and jolting. The individual in the driver's seat of the Ford Escape, captured in that fragmented image, was unequivocally not Mark Carter. The facial recognition software rendered it impossible to link the driver to Emily's husband. This revelation immediately reshaped the narrative once more. It shifted the focus away from Mark, at least as the sole perpetrator, and introduced a new, previously unconnected figure into the heart of the mystery. Further digging into public records and family connections revealed the identity of the man in the photograph. He was the husband of Emily Carter's cousin, a man named David, who had never been publicly tied to the case, nor had he been interviewed by the authorities prior to this discovery. His presence in Emily's car, in the moments leading up to or during her disappearance, was entirely unknown. The investigation then turned to David's movements. Records showed that 2 days after Emily Carter vanished, David left the state. He relocated, disappearing from his previous address. His departure was swift, almost as if he were fleeing. His movements eventually led investigators to a tragic, violent end for David himself. 5 months later, while living in a different state, he was killed in an off-road vehicle crash. The circumstances of his death were described as a freak accident, a solitary incident that brought his life to a sudden and definitive close. This sequence of events left investigators with more questions than answers. Was David a willing participant in Emily's disappearance and a subsequent attempt to conceal her fate? Was he acting under duress or on behalf of someone else? Or was he merely a pawn, a scapegoat deliberately placed in the driver's seat of a staged scene? His swift departure and subsequent death seemed too convenient, too fitting to be mere coincidence. The unanswered question lingered. Was he a willing accomplice and a final eliminator? Or was he an unfortunate figure used to deflect suspicion from the true culprit? The death of David, the man identified in the photograph driving Emily Carter's vehicle, brought a chilling finality to his own short chapter in this unfolding tragedy. With the individual identified as being in the car now deceased, the active investigation into Emily Carter's disappearance reached an impasse. Without the possibility of interrogation or further direct evidence from him, the case, for all intents and purposes, was suspended. The legal machinery, unable to proceed without a living suspect or definitive proof of foul play leading to a conviction, ground to a halt. The official investigation was effectively closed, the questions surrounding Emily's final moments left unanswered for the public. The evidence that had been painstakingly gathered, the submerged SUV, the untouched purse, the incongruous work glove, the burner phone, the partial photograph, the toll data, could not build a concrete enough case to bring charges. The truth of what happened to Emily Carter remained locked away in the silence of her unfulfilled life and the unresolved ambiguities of the investigation. However, the story did not end here for everyone. Emily's sister, Sarah, who had fought tirelessly to uncover the truth and provide a stable home for her niece and nephew, refused to let Emily's memory fade into mere statistics. driven by an enduring love and a commitment to ensuring Emily's name was not forgotten. She established a foundation in her sister's honor. This foundation aimed to raise awareness for missing persons and to support families navigating the agonizing uncertainty of sudden disappearances, transforming personal tragedy into a force for collective good. As this documentary draws to a close, the narrative circles back to the lingering, haunting questions that have defined Emily Carter's case. The mysteries remain like shadows in the periphery, refusing to be fully dispelled. Who, truly, was the architect of Emily's demise? Who possessed the cold calculation to lock the doors of that SUV, ensuring its descent into the frigid depths of Lake Lonesome? Who orchestrated the elaborate charade of placing the vehicle, rather than allowing it to be found in a crash? And perhaps most disturbingly, why did someone go to such extraordinary lengths to erase Emily Carter from existence, to silence her voice, yet inexplicably leave behind a single, oversized glove, a small, potent symbol of their presence, a silent accusation pointing towards a truth that may never be fully brought to light?